Hey, Lucky.
Hello, Nisha. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah.
Not a great day in history, that's for sure.
Yeah. These things. I mean, I suppose I cannot like. I suppose I'm getting old. But I I feel like um people find a way around obstructions in general.
Hello.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't think any amount of you know any amount of obstructions is going to stop people from getting what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Can you all hear me? I think this is working.
We hear you.
Excellent. Thanks.
Hello, hello. How's everyone doing?
Doing all right. Does anybody have a link to the
Yeah, I
Hacking
can
D
check.
notes?
I can throw it in here. There you go.
I never know where it is. Ever.
The age-old.
Finding the notes is half of the meeting.
Finding the notes is half of the meeting. 99 links, but this ain't the right one. Jay-Z's timeless words.
It's actually, yeah. He loved
Jay-Z, yeah. Had a lot of
meeting
foresight
agendas.
that, yeah. He knew that tabs were going to become a big problem in the future. So, had a lot of foresight in that song to get ahead of it.
I can be note taker this time, but maybe depending upon whether Brandon's not going to show up, so maybe it
I
depends
think
upon when
Brandon's not here.
Sajay is. Maybe Sajay is going to show up.
I believe so, given that he has the first agenda item. Give it a couple more minutes for the room to fill, the virtual space. Okay. Shall we kick it off? Yeah. Seeing a few nods there.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Okay. If anybody would like to chair it, otherwise I will just kick it off and hold that position.
Sure.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the OCI Working Group for Reference Type. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. I have linked the HackMD notes in the chat. If you don't have that, because I don't think they show up for folks that have just entered, please, I will actually post it there again just quickly. Please add your name as an attendee. That would be great. And we have Nisha. Thank you very much, Nisha. Gold medal to you for being a designated note taker. Really appreciate that. We have a few agenda items here that we're going to get into. And before I start, is there anything else? I just want to ask folks, this is going to be recorded and posted to YouTube. So please be kind with your words. This falls under the code of conduct. And please, if you have questions, we'll try and maintain order and flow of conversation through the raising of hands using the click reactions, click raise hand, and we'll focus the discussion through that. That would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Anything else before we get into it? No? Okay, excellent. So first agenda item is we have discuss proposal E, and there is a sub bullet under there, modify existing image spec. Sajay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Sajay. Thank you.
Right. So this is kind of continuing last week's conversation, specifically about what is the expectation from modifying the image spec and adding a reference field. What do you want existing registry operators to kind of like interpret the spec as? For example, there's a section in proposal E that states that if the reference field is there, then the referrers API or the references API needs to return this manifest as well. So a couple of points I wanted to call out and ask about that was, if we were to implement this, there is an amount of work that needs to be done on the operator side. For example, we expect the references field to be descriptors, which could or could not be a breaking change depending on how we parse it. The image spec itself does not call it out, but that does not mean that it would result in a behavior change in distribution in some way. So those are kind of questions that I wanted to ask as to how do we really want to go down the path where we have to kind of support this mix of hybrid APIs, because the argument of adding an existing field and it not changing the spec doesn't actually hold true, because it is actually coming out as a entry into the new API. And so registry operators definitely do need to change it to get the new API. And should we keep them separate and clean, or should we kind of like have this migration path? But I think the migration path is also a good story, because Brandon mentioned that, so giving this will give a ability to migration path. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up and open the floor up for thoughts around this.
So I think I have a specific answer to your question and a general answer to the general class of questions. The specific answer of what should a registry operator do with when it gets a reference, a new reference field in an image manifest, it doesn't know what to do with it. A registry operator today should ignore it as under the spec, as like new fields, ignore them, store them. There's a tricky intermediate time where it means something, but this registry doesn't know it means something yet, right? And I think that's really the like interesting part.
Right.
I think we should make this part of the spec, or at least part of the official written down discussion of the spec changes we're proposing. We should say registry operators should signal in some way references pushed before this time, before this date, before this year, month, something. It doesn't have to be a timestamp. References pushed before this date will not be indexed and will not be available in the referrers API. If you want to get those, then you have to repush it. And so only on you never have to like go back and crawl all manifests to find anything that has a reference and recrawl them. You could just say, after October 1st or whatever date that your particular registry decides to launch support for this, anything before that, you may push a reference. You can push a reference today and it will be ignored and not indexed. If you push it after we officially launch support, we will promise to return that in the refers API. That's the specific question, the specific answer to that question. I think we can discuss whether we think that's a good idea. The general class of a problem is the spec says ignore unknown fields, but it doesn't say what to do when that field becomes meaningful, right? We had a lot of the same discussion around the data field where, sure, you can push data. You can always push data. You could have always pushed data and the registry should have ignored it. But the change was now data actually means something. Now data should be, I don't remember whether it was a must or a should, but like should be the base 64 encoded content of that blob. And so there was a question also about should registries ignore that? Should it go back and enforce that anything that was pushed with data like matches that? I think we should consider as part of all of this, making an update to the spec, to the image spec to say, not just ignored, but like beware the semantics of that might change. If you've pushed data as a number, you might not be allowed to tomorrow because we might say it must be a string. Or if you've pushed to the reference field as a string, that might break tomorrow because we might enforce and require that it's an object descriptor. I think that would help us make these sort of changes in the future. Like I think in practical usage, that's already the way it is. Practically speaking, nobody is pushing a reference field today. But if some silly joker was watching these meetings and knew that a reference field was coming and was like, aha, I'm going to show them, I'm going to push one with a string and that'll really show them. We just need to document a little more clearly that it's not just ignored, like registry operators should ignore them and store them, whatever. But also if you happen to be pushing one, we make no guarantee. The spec makes no guarantee about the behavior of that. For the registry, it shouldn't crash the server. Please don't crash the server. But for clients, like the client might just completely barf if it is asked to pull a manifest of a type that it doesn't know. I think that is the general solution to this class of problems, which I hopefully think we will make more of in the future as we add more functionality and fields to existing types. That's also not specific to image spec. If we add fields to the artifact spec when it comes, or new types, new endpoints, like we'll have this problem in general. So I think we need to get out ahead of it. Now that we've had one in the past and one now, like we need to have a general solution to the problem of it's not just ignored, it's ignored and in the future, it might change its meaning and change the validation.
Right. And so if we clearly call out that the reference field may or may not be honored, depending on certain criteria, that part should be probably cleared up. Like there is a edge case where things might not work with using the reference field. And what I was trying to kind of like ask Brandon is, should we just go with the new manifest and for scenarios where registries don't support fall into the reference thing? Is there a proper path? I get that registries wouldn't support this immediately, but show them the right way, tell them this is the direction in the future. And then, yes, we have a time where we need to stick with the image manifest, but we recommend everybody to kind of go to the new manifest and the new way of querying the references without having to go back and forth. That's kind of what I was trying to say. Give the intent of what the specification is meant for, which is guide the proper usage or proper direction. Because the spec reads in the reverse order right now. Do the image manifest, and then, hey, by the way, there's also an artifact manifest. Instead, if we can rewire the priorities of how when somebody comes and reads the specification, it might make sense. That's what more the motivation was.
Yeah, I think removing that step, removing the image spec, the modified image spec notch makes the learning curve too hard. Not learning curve, the implementation curve too hard. Registry operators have to go all the way from image spec today, which they support happily, to a whole new type and whole new storage and whole new indexing and whole new everything. And that is going to be hard. It's hard to motivate. It's not hard to implement. It's hard to like, why should I put two people on this? You know,
I'm actually scared to touch the image spec because you're going to parse fields that are there in there. You introduce one regression, that's going to blow the entire a multi-tenant service. So it might sound easy, but it's not that easy, right? You want to test every path and have negative cases and whatnot. So that's why I wanted to kind of like make sure what is the P0 that we need to validate. If we say that, okay, incrementally we need to kind of do both, or which direction do we need to go?
Yeah,
I think it actually makes sense. It's not that I'm pushing back against it, but just want to kind of call out, okay, this is what we're deciding and this is what everybody needs to support. We need to support both the reference field as well as the new manifest support. That's going to be hard. And given that Docker Hub is not even supported changing the individual, config media types, I don't know where or when reference will be supported in any place at this point. So
yeah, I think that's why it is, that exact example is why it's important that we support something that doesn't require a new artifact type, because we can't, I mean, like you and I and the folks in our immediate bubble can promise, can pinky promise to support this at some point in the future,
right.
But there's 100 other registry operators that are not in this room and aren't part of the discussion. So we have to have something that works,
right,
whether or not Docker Hub ever supports it.
Right. And the only point I think is, should we have the referrers API also index it? That is where the middle ground that I'm trying to draw in terms of, agreed, we can support extended fields, data fields, because the data spec is written in such a way that we don't have to do anything with it, right? Like registry operators just ignore it. If it's a problem, it's a problem on the client. But this one is actually telling change the server behavior. So there's it's a little bit more gray than that.
In that case, I think that's why it's important that registry operators signal the references. The reference field will continue to be you can push to us a reference field. You've always been able to if you're conformant, but only after this date will it be actually, considered as used as for any semantic information. And for Docker Hub, that date might be never. Like they might never do it. Or any random registry on the internet might never do it. And so they just won't have a date that says after this, when you push this, you can also pull it from here. But then when ACR supports it, or GCR or whatever, they can say, it's October 1st. We promised to listen to those references when you push them.
That's right. Sounds good. I didn't have any other point besides that.
Okay, great. I could put my hand down as well now.
So is there a follow-up action item that needs to come out of this?
Yeah, I'd say, I think two things came out of that. One was we need to describe this situation better in proposal E. Describe like what happens if somebody pushes a reference field because they got it from some other registry, they're pushing it to you now, and you don't know what it means, or you don't make any meaning out of it. We need to document registry providers should say the reference field will be ignored until it will be considered ignored until after some date where it starts to matter. The other one is the longer term. In general, we need to add to the image spec, unknown fields are not just ignored, but also may change meaning in breaking ways in the future as we add new meaningful fields. Do people agree with both of those things? I'm happy to take on doing both of those things, but I don't want to do it if we're just going to argue in PRs after this.
I'm not sure, actually. I feel like we have to start somewhere and have an image spec maintainer look at it. Again, I do not know who that is.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy to argue with image spec folks not in this meeting, but if any of us disagree, I'd like to talk about it now so that we don't, so that we sort of present a unified front to whichever image spec maintainer takes a look. Cool.
Can you summarize those? What were those 2 points again? Sorry, I was having.
Yeah, sure. The one was for references specifically in proposal E, registry implementations should say, even if you push a reference to us, we will ignore it until after some date, where that date may be never for Docker Hub or something, for random Josh's registry or something. That's one. Two is image spec should add language that says unknown fields are ignored, continue to be ignored and accepted, but also the semantics of those fields may change in future revisions to the spec. Beware, you can put anything in here, but the semantics of that may change in breaking ways. Validation on that may change in breaking ways. That's on you for pushing an unknown field.
Yeah, I think we're effectively already in that situation.
Yeah,
according to
yeah,
the
yeah.
spec, right?
I mean, we definitely are. We just need to like tell people that we are. So
I
that,
think, I think that there are legitimate concerns to accepting input you don't understand that can lead to, issues in the future, whether that's like security or data loss, or I think we've seen examples of this where the spec allowing unknown fields introduces vulnerabilities that we didn't really understand.
this might be an issue for offline, but I'd love to know more about those. If you can share any specifics of those instances, I'd be
Yeah,
interested.
I think the being able to confuse a manifest list for a manifest was
Oh, sure.
a good example of sort of, ECR not accepting unknown fields made us not susceptible to that specific vulnerability, right?
Right. Yeah.
Not saying everyone should,
also not conformant, but
what we're doing,
not splitting hairs.
And sure, admitting we're not conformant, but
Yeah.
also like, you start accepting data with references that means things, and I think that there is value in saying, if we don't understand what this is, if we're not able to understand the semantic meaning of something, that if you push it, you are going to have a bad experience. Like maybe something's gonna be cleaned up that shouldn't, or maybe, I don't know.
There is always the escape hatch that like the spec in general is just what all registries and clients sort of generally agree to, the general shape of what we agree to. If ECR wants to say we don't, like, if you could write code, you may already have code that says if reference is in there, block it, because we're extra conservative about what's coming. That's fine. That's like, nobody is going to burn your house down for not being OCI compliant. Although I have had to talk Josh down before.
People certainly will drag us for it, but
sure,
there are legitimate reasons for
your reasoning is valid, right? Your reasoning of saying we're being extra conservative, even if that means we don't accept some otherwise valid manifest. Like, I don't know, you're not going to court. You're fine. Do those two items sound good? I can make a stab at doing those offline if we think those are good. Thumbs up, nod. All right, thanks.
Anything else for Sajay's topic?
Well, that was easy.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think it's interesting. It's always the timeless discussion of precedents of not versioning APIs and jamming fields in and what that means over versioning them. It's the age-old question of the right way to change things over time. And whatever you document here will be the precedent that we have to leverage in the future. So, excellent. All right. Next one is new manifest update. So this is kind of just a high level thing. I was just reading through the state of proposal E and taking a look. And I went back and I was thinking, when we originally introduced proposal E, there are a few questions on why didn't we just take the new manifest from proposal A and put it in wholesale? And I was trying to reconcile the differences between them, but then I found myself asking the same question. From memory, I think it was Nisha and Josh just saying, why can't we just put the new manifest for proposal A and proposal E? So one, I just wanted to ask that question because it was just hard for me to mentally map going through things, the changes there. And I don't know that I ever had an explanation as to why there were just these little changes, which may be fine, but it was more just around explanation. And if there is questions about that, should we just adopt the new manifest from proposal A into proposal E?
I think the primary differences there were this artifact type field, if I remember properly.
It's the biggest ones, artifact type, subject to reference, because we got in a pickle around, and that, you know, represented itself in the API. It was references as opposed to reference instead of referrers. It's just a whole thread. And, you know, the manifest, the new manifest and corresponding API isn't as well documented in proposal E. So if I just came along and read it as a drive-by in proposal E, it lacks a little bit more substance. So I have to go back to proposal A to look at where it came from, the heritage of that, and then mentally translate fields that are and are not present to look at the outcomes. So I was just like, you know, is that really what I should do? Should we put more in proposal E, or should I just take what's in proposal A and say, hey, here is the new manifest type, and here we go. So that's kind of just my mental thinking here. Jason, you have your hand up.
So I don't have a strong horse in the race of whether we use subject or reference or, you know, teapot or whatever. If you think it would be useful to have a section in proposal E that is meaningful diffs from proposal A, like it says sort of like we took the good parts of proposal A and the good parts of, that's a value judgment. We took parts of each of these things, except the thing we took, we also renamed. If you think it would be helpful to have a description of why we thought that was worthwhile, I think that's fine. I don't know if I think Brandon is probably the person to answer those questions, and he's not here. But I also don't know if it's, well, it might be not meaningful, or it might be meaningful to the image spec maintainers or the spec maintainers in general that we're trying to propose this to eventually, because they might say, I don't care about these paragraphs of why you named this thing this instead of this, or they might say, well, why didn't you call it subject? Subject is a way better name. Oh, there's already 3 paragraphs of text here to explain that to me. So I guess I don't know if it's useful. That doesn't mean not to do it, but I think the target audience is the folks we're going to propose this to. If we write that text, the target audience isn't us among here. I think we generally either understand or don't care. It's folks, you know, when writing a document, the target audience is useful. And I think that's the target audience we should write for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you know, if I, again, take what you said and play it back, I think the example of the new manifest is weak in proposal E. And it's not really load bearing as to why. So it's just basically, here are the top level fields. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other proposals are very well thought out and represented. So I think at a minimum, we should try and at least flesh out the examples and have worked examples, because, you know, when I read through proposal A right before this, it's very clear about annotations and, you know, the new properties in the image spec. But then when I go down to it's just basically just a skeleton without an example. Yeah, so just, it doesn't look like it bears much meaning. It's like, well, what, you know, why is this? And then when I was like, well, I'll write this, I can't actually write it because I don't know why the fields have changed. Because I have the representation from A, and it's like, well, I don't know why artifact type was removed. You know, at least to be able to write it down, I have a high level that, you know, Brandon didn't think it was anything that required filtering on or was worth storing there, and it could be stored in annotations. And then just the renaming subjects reference item, that's probably less important, but there were just a few pieces of, you know, maybe the action item is just filling out the example. And I know we try to be very succinct in not putting too much in there, but if I look at the weight is on all the work in the image spec, but nothing on the new manifest and or even the API endpoint that we're proposing to query these things. So I just think shoring that up in general would probably be a good thing. Well, I'll take it as an action item when Brandon's back, just to do that, if we think that that's the case. But I was just taking the lens of, if I read this and had no prior knowledge, does what we're presenting make sense to somebody who wasn't in this room. And I just felt the new manifest piece was weak in the context of proposal E, probably not because of intention. It was because everybody had context from proposal A that's not represented in proposal E. But yeah, as you said, Jason, we're not going to say, go read this, go read that, go read this, watch 10 videos, make your own decision. We're just going to say, here it is, look at this. I see hands. I think it's in order, Sajay.
Yeah, actually, Jason, your point is excellent. Like using what the maintainers of OCI or the image spec and distribute spec might attach to, right? That said, last week's call, Mike Brown did mention about bringing the extensions API as a way to kind of take this forward. So I've been trying to kind of like get this on Brandon's eyes for some time. So maybe that'll happen. The other thing of whether we should use subject or referrers, like you said, it's just a matter of whatever we propose. It's not, there's no strong opinion there, whatever works. But the order of the spec is still kind of like something that I want to get people's eyes on in terms of, it gets really complicated in terms of filtering. And should we take this entire thing or should we trim it down to support something? Because I know that, Jason, you were first about let's get something that is achievable and then move on, right? It probably needs a little bit more clarity of what we go after, at least for an MVP or a V1 of the implementation, and trim it down. Because the second part of the spec is a little bit dense. I wouldn't say dense. It needs a little bit more clarity that can help. That's all I had.
Thanks, Sajay. Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think if comparing the new artifact manifest part of E to A makes you feel like E is lacking, we should definitely, bring it up. I don't want anything that's not up to that level. Sajay, I didn't quite understand the extensions point you were talking about.
So, I mean, you've been in those calls, right? Like it's been about almost 2 years. We kind of worked a way in which we can add new APIs to distribution without touching manifests. You're again making this proposal will modify the manifest URL path, which is something that I'm a little concerned about again. Whereas the extensions enables us to route it to something entirely different and not touch the routes at all for the manifest. So that was one of the reasons why the extensions approach was discussed. I think Mike Brown also kind of like spoke in the last OCI call to see if we can leverage that same model where we put OCI artifacts discovery or something like that, which would give the same references implementation without having to touch the manifest path. That was something that we probably wanted to adopt to E to make it land faster without touching manifest, digest, and then finally the referrers.
Gotcha. Sure. I think same answer about the name of the fields. If that's our last sticking point, I will gladly give up. If you want to call it Sajay's endpoint, I will let you call it whatever you want if that's the last thing we disagree on. I will also echo your agreement with my point about let's cut as many features out as we can and iterate. If we get something through the spec process without filtering and without pagination or whatever, then stupendous, we can add that later. I would like to advocate for that as much as possible, just to reduce complexity in each of these changes.
Yeah, I think I agree with exactly what you said there. The filtering part just seems hard to make work, and especially when you start thinking about, I think bigger registries might be able to figure out something. They might want to throw a bunch of people at it and build some fancy index, but I think we shouldn't make that a requirement, and we shouldn't. I think that just the any to any filtering is more than most use cases have seemed to suggest they need. And so I would say either cut filtering or have filtering, but have it constrained to a few fields like artifact type, which I think was the original reason why artifact type was out of the annotations blob, is that we wanted it to be treated specially, not like any other annotation.
Yeah, I'll just say we're doing a dangerous amount of agreeing here, folks. We need to really, I come here for the fights and we're not doing nearly enough fights.
I can start talking about ECR spec compliance again.
No. That was a joke. That was a joke. Josh, sorry, I cut you off. You had your hand up.
No, yeah, I agree cutting things out. I think proposal E, it has a lot of strengths, but it seems to get lost in the fact that there is so much on the filtering, and it doesn't seem necessary. I think it needs to focus more on the upgrade path from a registry that has none of these features to a registry who has the new manifest or the artifact manifest. So I don't know if that work should be done in that document itself or somewhere else, but I think we need to start thinking about upgrading and cutting out as much as we can to, keep the agreement in at a maximum here.
I agree. Are we are we taking? I'm just going to check the notes here, but it would be interesting to take these. Does it, Nisha? I see your hand. Go ahead. Oh, hand down. Okay, probably we can move on to the next one.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Two-step process: hand and unmute.
Yeah, I know, and writing notes. Okay.
Yes,
So,
3 hands.
So it seems to me that there's a consensus that proposal E is good as it is, but it must be broken down into sub proposals that need to be proposed one after the other. Does that
That's
work?
not what I heard.
Okay.
Not what I
That's
said.
not my interpretation. My interpretation is, and again, my interpretation, not everybody's, is that we need to strip back proposal E to make it as understandable as possible to an audience like the TOB to understand, and strip all the complexity out of, which we've called out filtering. I called out making the manifest just a little bit better at worked example. And Josh called out maybe framing it in, hey, I'm a registry operator today. Here is the upgrade path. This is what you'd need to do today, and this is where you need to get to. Sajay called out, instead of messing with the, manifest APIs, we use the extension mechanism that's in distribution now, which was in proposal A, and in proposal E, it landed as, hey, no, we're going to update distribution immediately. So what I'm interpreting is there a proposal E prime, which is, kind of goes to my next point in the, how do we start to coalesce to where we would be building the artifact that we would present as a proposal to, I don't know if it's the OCI-TOB or if it's the spec maintainer, I don't know, to the audience that it needs to go to. How do we get it to that spot, which is my next point. So I don't know, I'm going to pause there. That's my interpretation of what was said right now, is we need to trim it down, frame it a little different, and flesh some parts out, remove others, so that it's in the spirit of making it the minimal viable set of changes that we think would be adopted. Josh.
So my understanding is that the TOB, unless we are creating a new spec, which maybe the new manifest would be, I think we can bypass entirely the TOB. That's my understanding.
You
But at
could
the same
probably
time,
bypass distribution if you do the extensions too. So now we're just down to spec
Right.
maintainers if we make that proposal.
that's a good point. That's all I have.
So now it's down to spec. Yeah. So it might be the audience might be just spec maintainers apart from the new manifest, which maybe the TOB looks at. I don't know exactly who looks at what. Oh, you're muted either hardware. Don't hear you.
I was waiting for someone to say, Nisha, you can talk.
Okay, sorry. Josh's mouth was still moving. So I was just
Whoops.
thinking he was finishing up his point, but I didn't hear what he actually said. Are we good, Josh? Okay, I saw the wave.
Yeah. Yes, I'm good. Go ahead.
Nisha, thank you.
Yeah, I may not have been clear in my explanation there, but it seems to me that proposal E is, at least from hearing conversations and taking notes, proposal E is good at collecting the things that we want to upstream in the end, but we just have we have to figure out which parts to upstream first. So from me, from what I am seeing, we ought to start with proposal with the image changes, so the new artifact, and then following that, we put the filtering part in. We put the backwards compatibility with the registry operators getting the signaling when they would make that change, and so on and so forth. But it seems to me that the new type of manifest needs to go away.
Just the last part of what you said. The new image manifest needs to
be proposed first.
Okay, Lucky, go ahead.
I would just say, I don't want ordering. It's like presenting a change to law and they say, actually, we like the first sentence, but we're not going to do the rest. And I just get worried that the rest is going to get bogged down. So I would be particularly disappointed as being, you know, one of the authors from proposal A, that we put this up and they said, oh yeah, we're going to make the changes to image, but that's it. Everything else is gone. Because that's actually not the spirit of the proposal. The other thing is, if you stage it out, knowing how these things work, there could be changes of government halfway through this and people don't have the same drive. So I'd like there to be a commitment to, you know, I don't have the authority to assert this, but if you came and you drafted up some legislation, you wouldn't say, please just do it, half of it. You might be able to present that back and make an agreement, but you wouldn't space it out. I worry about, you know, timing things and doing things when obviously it is touching a lot of different parts. But yeah, I wouldn't want to do that because I know how that game's going to end right now, which is the new manifest won't get in. So I can, you know, I could show myself to the door now if that's what's going to happen.
Okay. Why wouldn't the new manifest get in?
No, you know how these things go. I can't answer that question, Nisha.
Well, I mean, we have a full.
I'm not representative there. You are. So that's up to you.
True. This is true. But the folks that did push back were registry operators. But if we were to submit the image spec with the change in the reference and say that the registry had, you know, registry operators ought to or should communicate when a field is recognized or unrecognized, etc., whatever Jason said, that would be the first part. And then the next part would be adding the artifact manifest. So I feel like because that change, like that verbiage in the spec is not there, that seems to be blocking the rest of the stuff that we're trying to do.
So I think, Lucky, to your point of being worried that if we stage proposals, you know, proposal 1, 2, 3, or whatever, that the TOB or whatever, whoever we're proposing this to may say, we'll take one, and now we're kind of tired. We're just going to stop and we're not going to do 2 or 3. And so that sounds like motivation for moving 1 and 2 into one proposal, you know, like bundling them together. I'm specifically not saying what each one contains so that it doesn't matter, but just like let's push a little bit more towards the first cut of the proposal so that they don't accept one part of it but not another part we like. I think that's fine. I think that's good. And in fact, if we want to propose the new artifact manifest and the image spec changes at the same time, I think that's a reasonable compromise to say, like, that, you know, here is the upgrade. It's not just here's 2 proposals, but like, here is the upgrade path we propose. First, you start with image spec changes, and then you can add these artifact manifest. I will say, I think there is a useful thing about minimum viable things, which is like it prevents over engineering. It prevents doing more than the user is asking for. Because, you know, I may think that I want the whole Sistine Chapel, but really they just want, like, you know, a place to sit and pray, right? Like they don't need the whole thing. And so when I build them a little room, they're like, that's enough for me. Stop there, you know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's maybe the best thing. To your point about like changing winds and tides and things, like that's being nimble. That's if in a year from now, none of us care about OCI because our houses are all on fire, like, man, I'm glad we didn't waste any time talking about OCI stuff because I got to put my house out, you know? So I know that that's not a very satisfying like rebuttal, but I think if we decide not to propose something until it's all of the stuff that makes all of us happy, then we're never going to do it. And it might be more than they want to approve anyway. If we say, here's the minimal thing we all mostly agree to, that's cut 1. We can even preview them, like, here's cut 2, here's cut 3. Then I think that's a little easier to get swallowed upstream.
And I believe that, I'm sorry, I lowered my hand there prematurely, but I believe that the last time proposal A came up, one of the pushbacks was that it has too many changes. So I think part of the goal of this working group is to find that set of changes that can be broken down so they're easily understood why they need to happen in the order that they're happening.
I think proposal A means that we don't have too many changes, right? There is a set of changes on the image spec that were outside of the scope of what proposal A had. There are a different set of changes. We didn't take them. So we took the stuff from, you know, Brandon's approach. I think it was D, no changes, but we just add stuff to image spec. So that's kind of, and we take the new manifest, which didn't require any other further changes to the image spec. So they would then decoupled. And given the extensions work has landed in distribution, we even decoupled having to mess with distribution. So I think it's you know, what I hear is let's just put the proposal together. It sounds like proposal E is a good point. We should riff on the bits that we should, you know, are we going to create proposal E prime? What is the artifact that we're going to bubble up? And we should do it in one big thing. I don't want to split these things out. I would say, here is the proposal in entirety. And I like what Josh said about framing it through, here's the upgrade path, here's why, you know, maybe a few things around why we think these endpoints are important, and then go from there. But I do want to start to move us in a direction of having an artifact that we present to these groups. And it sounds like we are coalescing on just a few changes to E that would put us in a good position to do such a thing.
Yeah, I think so. I would like to agreement sandwich and end with a thing I think we all agree on, which is that filtering should be deferred, not necessarily excised, but like not now, and then we'll figure it out later.
So should I just throw up an issue? I agree on that. I feel like the conversation we've had today is drop filtering, make sure the new manifest proposal has a worked example just to give it, and you know, we can defer the discussion about whether it should be the same as proposal A or what Brandon was thinking there to later. We could move the registry endpoint out to extensions. It sounds like both Michael and Sajay are suggesting that that's probably a better place for that. That would probably make it easier, right? Sajay, am I and Michael interpreting your tea leaves correctly? Thumbs up from
Putting the endpoint in extensions.
yeah, you not updating the distribution, but nesting the HTTP endpoint under the extensions API work that was done. So there's no change to, we're not suggesting a change to distribution out of the gate.
Okay. I think we I think we should suggest an endpoint for this. I think part of the goals of the working group is to provide a way to query. So if we think it's better to put it in some other place as an extension endpoint, that's fine. But I do think that is part of, I see that as part of this work.
I think for the purposes of staging, I think it's the whole point of extensions is a place to go, a sandbox to go do whatever you want in. And if we do whatever we want in there, and then everyone says, yes, this is great, why is the path, underscore OCI / extensions and not / whatever, then we could say, listen, we've got a year of operational experience handling this endpoint. I'm happy to write another, URL path to make it called the other way. I think that's fine to me. Again, I don't care what the URL is.
Same.
Because no one will see it. Nobody but the 12 of us will ever see it. Your secret is safe with me.
To that point, yes. I do think that, and having an endpoint is important.
Yeah. I agree.
Yep. Not arguing with that.
Dangerous amounts of agreement.
Just taking notes here. So should I throw up an issue with these main points that were discussed, and do we all noodle on E prime? Because I want to, is E prime the artifact that we want to noodle on that becomes where the proposal is that goes up?
Yeah, I think for practical purposes, we should just modify E until we're all happy with it. I don't want to have a proliferation of proposals, E prime and E prime final, no really, and whatever. I think we should just edit E until we're happy with it. Does anyone disagree with that? But I agree with the shape of the changes you're talking about. Absolutely.
Okay, then I'll just capture that, and we riff on in PRs in line with those things. We can pull out individual PRs and let Brandon, I should say, sorry, Brandon, the right, when he comes back, he'll have context for each of these movements. And it's going to look like we're all working as one based on that issue. So I can go create that issue. We can at least mention what the big outcomes are here. And I'm sure Brandon will be sorry, not a good day for me. And 2 strikes. Let's see if I can go out swinging or looking. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. We got 8 minutes left. What else? Or is that?
I believe we have a demo.
Yes. Sorry, Josh. 8 minutes. Can you do it? Sorry, didn't give you much time.
I'm extremely overwhelmed, but let's see. Can see?
Yeah.
Okay. So last week I put together this GitHub org OCI playground with multiple copyright violations. If anyone wants to be added to this, I'll put you on as an owner, no problem. So the goal I was having here was just to see if proposal E even works. So we have it in theory, but can we write some code against it? So I decided on using Zot and GGCR for a few reasons. Zot, both of these projects are very active. So like, I'm thinking we could get input from the maintainers. Jason's on GGCR. Ram, who comes to these calls, is on Zot. And then, full disclosure bias, ChainGuard is doing a lot of internal stuff with GGCR. So it made a lot of sense. But if we want to like bring in repos here, such as distribution, or us, whatever we want. Like we can use this as a home for that. And really the only reason it's not in my own name is I just felt it was something easy for you to type in the browser and find. But anyway, so I have a client and registry here, and if you like go to these repos, I just added stuff to the top of the README that's like kind of the demo, and this is the diff for what it took to get there, and that's on all 3 of the repos in here. But onto the demo. So Zot stores stuff on disk. So I'm going to blow away the storage and then start the server. And then I'm going to run through basically these commands I have in the ggcr repo. So first, this is just putting something into the registry to start. So an image that's the actual Zot image itself to localhost 8080 where Zot is running. All right, and then Zot keeps like an index of, like an OCI index of everything that's in there. I'm pretty sure other registries don't do it this way, and I need to work with that team to figure out how best to do this. But all right, so the first is creating a reference using the reference field on image spec. So I'm going to create a text file, hello txt, and then push it to this text file tag. And this kind of surfaced one of the issues I found is like, to make a reference, do you need a separately tagged thing, or is there a way to just push it up anyway? So this does that. And then if you actually look at the manifest for this, you can see it has this reference field here. And then in the index, like in the storage side, this is the part that's very dubious. This was not in the proposal at all, but I needed a way to somehow link the thing. So I came up with this annotation, but I think that's an implementation detail that maybe we don't need to even discuss, but worth bringing up that this is how I'm linking things. And then I also have implemented the references endpoint, and so basically, and hid it behind grain refs command. So if you look at an image, references, you can see this is returning the index like proposal E describes, and with the manifest there. And I have like a second text file just to show that it really does work. So there's 2 there now. Yeah, that's it. I mean, no filtering, no dumb registry to smart registry, but that's sort of next. I want to make sure that you can, with this fork of Zot and like, you know, I don't know, some stable like ECR or something, like push from one to the other with the new stuff and the old stuff. But so it's mostly doable. I haven't done anything with the new artifact type, but I know we're out of time, so ping me if you want to get in on this org here.
I don't have any comments except this looks great. Thanks for doing that, Josh. It's great to see it in, you know, not in Markdown. It's great to see it in Markdown, don't get me wrong, but it's great to see it in, you know, real live pokeable
Right.
service.
In theory, it's great, but yeah, and I am running into all sorts of questions, so this will be pretty good to mess with.
Do you have a preview of some of the, I don't know, questions or things that you encountered that were difficult to deal with?
Not yet, besides what I just said on the call. So I'll put together an issue maybe on the working group repo with like what is confusing to me. Yeah, I'll do that this week.
This is sweet.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I would love to understand, especially the links that you used in the annotation, just understanding the problem you're trying to solve there and if there's anything missing. But yeah, that's also another place we need to get to. The implementation is going to drive feedback as well. Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you for presenting.
Was the link the subject? Is that basically the subject descriptor, or is that
it's the digest of
reference
the
thing?
So you post a manifest that has the reference. The digest of the manifest that you're posting, I'm putting that in the links in a comma separated list. Let me actually I'll show you how the index looks now. Like,
missed that. Cool.
This has like a comma separated list. So this is obviously not the right way, but I needed a way to loop through the storage. But if it's, for other registries, you may be putting it in a SQL database, or like, I don't know that it's something we need to worry about.
One tip is we actually organize the directory structure using the SHA as the name of the structure, and then kind of put the links files into the manifest, so that if you look for references, you can just go there and directly pick out the manifest without actually modifying the manifest JSON. So that's one way to do it. You can also index it by artifact type as a directory if you want to, but if you don't want to care about filtering, those are the multiple options that we chose. It's pretty much the same thing, right? You want to get a hive of all the references for that specific manifest in some way. That's what you end up doing. I mean, those are just a couple of options you can.
I want to discuss this in depth. Let me open that issue. I'll post it in Slack, and we can go through it.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
That brings us to the end of the meeting and the agenda. Thank you very much, folks. And please add any agenda items for next week. We'll see you all at the same time, same place next week. Thank you all. Go and have great days. Cheers.
Everyone. See you.
You too, Jason. Bye-bye.